Hi all, this again is Steph Giordano with Human Services Research Institute, or HSRI. This is the third of 5 modules for our 2017-18 NCI Adult In-Person Survey Refresher Training. In this module, we're going to take a look at the Adult In-Person Survey, Section 1. Again, as a reminder that this is a refresher training, and so only for those of you who have completed a full NCI training and are returning to surveying this year. Before jumping into the survey, we want to just cover some basic administration of Section 1 of the Adult In-Person Survey. As always, Section 1 may only be answered by the individual receiving services. This is because these are the more subjective questions, like if the person likes where they live, what they do during the day, if there are places that they may feel afraid or scared. The only what we'll call an exception here is made for those who require translators or additional communication support. If that is the case, we absolutely allow for additional people to be present in order to help facilitate conversation in any way that the person needs. For all questions, we want surveyors to ask the question as it's written in the survey, and only if the person has some difficulty responding or understanding the question would you rephrase the question. We do offer rephrasings throughout the survey. You may also have your own rephrasings that work well, which is totally fine as long as you are keeping the intent of the question. We also have an interviewer handbook that offers additional rephrasings, explanations, and definitions as needed throughout the survey for all of the questions. As referenced in earlier module, we have those bell symbols throughout the survey, which indicate that there's a pre-survey question where you can find a familiar name or term that can be used as part of the conversation. Finally, and really importantly here, we always record answers the way the person responds. Now, this doesn't mean if the person is having trouble understanding a question that we still mark the answer that they give and move on to the next. We would, of course, spend some time helping the person better understand the question that's being asked. However, if after some clarification and feeling comfortable that the individual understands what's being asked, they give a response that you may feel is in contrast to what you may know about the service system, we would still take their response as it is given. We'll see some examples of this throughout Section 1 and Section 2 of the survey. Okay, so now we're really getting into the survey here, Section 1 of the face-to-face meeting with the person. We do start out with some of those general instructions that we just covered. We also have at the bottom of this page a bit of a script that you can use to help introduce yourself and the project to individuals. You may have your own sort of script that you use, and that is totally fine. I just want to show some of the information here that is really important to cover. Specifically in this middle paragraph, where we let the person know that the survey is not a test. There are no right and wrong answers, so it's really just about the person's opinion, how they feel about things. We want to make sure that people know that it's okay to skip questions that they don't feel comfortable answering, that they can ask for clarification whenever needed, and that the survey is totally confidential. And this is a really important point here to let people know that services and supports are not going to be directly affected by how they answer questions. And additionally, that confidentiality means that no matter what they answer in the survey, we don't go back to case managers, family, or staff to report on how the person answered. Finally, before asking these questions, we just want to double check this agreement to participate, so being doubly sure that the person is okay with taking this survey and giving their consent to do this face-to-face meeting. All right, and getting into the survey meeting questions themselves now. So we start out with questions about the home, asking whether people like where they live. If it's a no or in-between response, we want to know what they don't like about where they live. And we ask to everybody whether they would like to live somewhere else. So this being early on in the survey, if the person answers yes to both question 1 and question 3, it may be completely valid 2 responses. However, it is an indicator that you may want to follow up just to be sure that the person is in fact understanding the questions that are being asked and not just acquiescing to your questions. So again, if the person says yes, they like where they live and that they would like to live somewhere else, or perhaps gives a no response to both of these, we may want to follow up with a couple of open-ended questions just to make sure that the person is fully understanding these questions. We asked some questions around privacy in the home, including whether people let the individual know before they come into the home. Just an important note here, we are also including staff who have keys, so making sure that those staff are knocking before they come in, that they're scheduling times to come into the home, and they're showing up when they're expected. So essentially ensuring that even when staff have keys to the home, that the person has some autonomy over who's coming in and out of their home. Beginning with question 7, we have some questions around employment and other daily activities. So first asking if the person has a paid job in the community. I would suggest asking or including this definition of a community-based job to help the person understand that what we're looking for here is a paid job that takes part in a community setting, so around individuals without disabilities. You may have information from pre-survey question 7 that tells you that a person does in fact work at a specific location. If that's the case, you can use the name of their work to ask this question. Important note here, even if you do have pre-survey information, you would still want to ask this question just to make sure that that information is still up to date and to help facilitate the next few questions. This question 7 here is one as well that we want to always again be sure that we record responses that the individual gives. So if the person responds that they do have a paid job in the community, even if after some explanation we know that the person is working, say, in a paid facility-based setting, if they insist that yes, they do have a paid community job, we would still code this as yes and move on to the next question. And these next few questions really follow up based on how the person responds to question 7. So if they say no, they do not have a paid community job, we're going to find out if they would like one. If they do work in a community job, we'll want to know if they like where they work and if they want to work somewhere else. Question 11 looks specifically at going to a day program or sheltered workshop. So this is where people with disabilities spend their days. We have some additional definitions by what we mean by this information. Question 12 is slightly different from previous years, but this is essentially looking at the person's level of satisfaction with the amount of time that they spend at their day program or sheltered workshop. We also want to know about classes, training, or things that people do to help get a job, get a better job, or do better at the job that they have now. For individuals who we know are currently working, we can amend this question to simply say, do you take classes, training, or do something to help you get a better job, or do better at the job you have now? For those who are not working, we may just ask, do you take classes, training, or do something to help you get a job? Finally, we end the section asking whether people volunteer, and then move into questions around feeling safe. This is an important spot here to remind people that they are free to skip questions that they may not feel comfortable answering. Question 15 is handled slightly differently from other questions in that we're going to ask whether there are any places a person feels afraid or scared, but we want to go ahead and read this list of options here for places where the person may feel afraid or scared and offer that other response, so an open-ended if there are other places that you don't mention that the person feels afraid or scared. The next section is about friends and family, so whether people have friends they like to do things with or talk to. For this question, as has been in the past, we have those 2 yes responses, so we want to try and parse out whether people have friends who are only staff or family from those who have friends who are not just staff and family. For question 25, which ends out the questions around friends and family, can you see and or communicate with your family when you want to? This is handled slightly differently from previous years in that not applicable response is also for people who live with their family. So again, for those who are living in the family home, we would go ahead and not ask question 25. Questions around community participation and leisure. So for this section, we start out by asking an open-ended question about what people like to do when they go out. That information is not going to be recorded, however, it can be used to ask questions 26 and 27, which is around whether people are able to go out and do things that they like to do as often as they like to do them. Separately, we ask when people are in the home whether they have enough things they like to do. So essentially whether they have enough things so that they're not bored when they're at home. We have those questions around rights and privacy. Then we go into questions about satisfaction with services and supports, and these are those questions around case management, service planning, and staff. For question 33, have you met or spoken with your case manager? You may have the name of the case manager that you can plug in here. You may not have the name, but there might be a more state-specific terminology that can be used instead of case manager or service coordinator. If that's the case, you can absolutely use that terminology again to help the person best understand this question. Beginning with question 36, we have some questions around the service plan and service planning meeting. So first, do you have a service plan? This is a list of services that the case manager will help the person get. We want to use, again, the terminology that the person would best understand here. So whether it's an ISP, IPP, we can talk about the list of goals that the person may have put together at their last annual meeting. Any way that the person would best understand what a service plan is. Again, this is a spot where if the person, after some conversation, says that they do not have a service plan, we would always take the response that they give. We then go into questions specific to the planning meeting, so whether the person took part in the last planning meeting. This is essentially whether the person was there present at the planning meeting. I do want to note here, if the person says no, you do want to follow up and find out whether they had the option to attend but chose not to. We want to know whether people understood what was being talked about at the last planning meeting, so whether words were used that the person understood and that the planning meeting was in their preferred language, whether the meeting included the people that the individual wanted there, and if people were able to choose the services that they get as part of their service plan. We then ask those questions about staff who help at the day program, work, or at home, so whether staff are respectful and if they come and leave when they're supposed to. We then ask these questions around transportation. So just an important point here that question 44 and 45 are very different questions around transportation. So whether people have a way to get places they need to go, so those are things like going to work, getting to appointments, so can they get a ride if they need one? And separately, if they're able to get places that they want to go to do something outside of their home, so things like going to see friends, going out for entertainment, or doing something for fun. Finally, we conclude section 1 asking whether people feel that services and supports help them live a good life. And then we have this question 47, which is for the surveyor to indicate whether section 1 is valid for data analysis purposes. I cannot overstate here the importance of this question in ensuring that surveys are only considered invalid if the person cannot or did not answer any questions in section 1 in a valid or consistent manner. Now, I encounter a number of instances where an individual may be able to answer a couple of questions, perhaps around satisfaction with the home, but some of the perhaps more complex questions the person is not able to give valid answers to. If this is the case, we mark the questions as the person responds to those that they're able to give valid responses to, and all others are marked as don't know or unclear responses. For this question 47, in that case, we would say that yes, the person gave consistent and valid responses to the questions that were answered. Again, we do not want to overuse this no response. This should only be used if the person is unable to give any valid or consistent responses for all of section 1. We do have an additional resource or video to provide more clarity on when to mark the section 1 as valid and can be requested by surveyors at any time. That concludes our review of section 1. Our next module will take a look at section 2 of the in-person survey. Again, thank you so much for listening.